quarterback going into this upcoming season, just edging out Aaron Rodgers. Now, under the name Aaron Rodgers, I have a big line underneath that, because this is my draft strategy that I want to stress to you in this segment. Is when you are, first off, make your own player rankings. Actually list all the people and go through them and sort them out on what you think. Who you like, who you don't like, for whatever reasons. Okay? Then what you want to do is you want to break that down into tiers. You want to correctly identify where the production drop occurs at, what players, where that happens, where that takes place. And to me, at the quarterback position, your top tier elite can't miss guys, there's only two of them. It's Andrew Luck and Aaron Rodgers. Then I have a big line. Then after that comes your next tier of guys, and this is a big tier of guys where most people are going to be getting their starting quarterback in this tier, and so long as you don't overdraft one of these guys in the second or third round, you should be okay with just about any of them. But at my third quarterback on my personal rankings, I have Big Ben Roethlisberger, a proven all-pro quarterback with lots of weapons on his offense, and he was on the Pittsburgh Steelers were the number one offense in all of football last year. He's a threat to run it in as well. He just big plays, you name it. So I have him in at number 3. The aging Peyton Manning comes in at number 4 for me. He will still throw the ball a lot. However, the efficiency at which he does so this year remains to be seen, especially with losing weapon tight end Julius Thomas and just about every offensive lineman that was capable that they had. That concerns me much more. So that is why I am a little leery on Peyton Manning. If you can get him in round 3 or later, he is worth taking as your number 1 quarterback. However, if you're taking Peyton Manning in round 1 or round 2, you just made a really bad pick, and you're probably not winning your fantasy football league. After Peyton, I have Matt Ryan. Arguably, I'd put him ahead of Peyton. I really like Ben Roethlisberger coming off of last year, going forward this year, and I actually really like Matt Ryan having healthy offensive weapons and an slightly improved offensive line and a new coaching staff. He's got Julio Jones and Roddy White, and just he's going to throw the ball. After that, I got Tom Brady. Depending on how many games Tom Brady misses, that affects where he is on this list. If he doesn't miss any games, he's definitely a top 5 quarterback, somewhere in between 3 and 5. If he is guaranteed to miss 1 to 4 games, then he's somewhere in between your 5 to 10 range, as I have him right now. Now, a name I did have up here that I put big drop arrows by is Cam Newton. Cam Newton has been a solid fantasy football quarterback throughout his entire NFL career, primarily from the rushing touchdowns he gets. Now, last year he finally got a big, huge touchdown-catching wide receiver to throw to in Kelvin Benjamin. He has a good tight end in Greg Olsen. And then they also drafted wide receiver Devin Funchess, so it was looking like he had his best set of weapons yet, and they were young and big and fast, and looked for him to do good stuff. Well, Kelvin Benjamin, the breakout rookie from last year, tore an ACL or something like that, and he is out for the season. And now it is looking like Cam Newton basically has no one to throw to. They have arguably no depth at wide receiver whatsoever. Their number 1 receiver now is either Devin Funchess, the rookie, who they have no idea what he's going to be, or Jericho Cotchery. Yes, that Jericho Cotchery that you thought was retired for the last 2 to 5 years. So big, and their offensive line at tackle is still super susceptible. So big down arrows by Cam Newton. He is probably overrated. Avoid him unless you can get him as a value backup somewhere later on in your draft. But then I've got Matthew Stafford, of course, with the great offensive weapons and the strong arm. He just needs to show that he can stay healthy, and he's a good fantasy quarterback. Tony Romo, pretty much the same deal. He'll get more with his legs, though, than a Matthew Stafford. Drew Brees, big name, always overdrafted. Don't take Drew Brees in round 1 or round 2. If he's a guy you like and you can get him in round 3, okay, you have my blessing. But there are only 2 quarterbacks that anyone should draft in the first 2 rounds of this fantasy football season. That's Aaron Rodgers and Andrew Luck. And then rounding out the bottom the end of my second tier of quarterbacks, we've got Russell Wilson, who will have good weeks. He will get you stuff on the ground, but very seldomly will he have a 400-yard day or a 4-touchdown day, and he will too often have, one touchdown, no touchdown, 160-yard days. And then Phillip Rivers, the gunslinger of the San Diego Chargers. He had a phenomenal fantasy football last year, and just the style of their play, he's going to be throwing the ball a lot. Perfect for fantasy football. Now let's get into the final third tier of draftable quarterbacks before we move on to other positions quick. At this tier, I've got Eli Manning towards the top, mainly because of his wide receiver weapons in Odell Beckham Jr. and Victor Cruz. Also, he's a proven Pro Bowler. However, I do very much like Ryan Tannehill and Teddy Bridgewater as well this year, if not equally to Eli, maybe even a little more, as well as Derek Carr of the Oakland Raiders. Now, the debatable ones then from this point on would be Joe Flacco, Andy Dalton, Sam Bradford, Nick Foles, and Jay Cutler. Those are your only quarterbacks even left still available, even worth considering drafting as a backup quarterback for your team. So it is very important to get a quarterback that is in one of those first two tiers that you feel confident and strong in. All right, now let's move to running back, the perennially most valuable position in fantasy football. If you are in the middle to back end of your draft, do not reach on the best running back available just because a bunch of running backs have already gone. If there is a wide receiver, quarterback, or tight end that you think is going to score more touchdowns or get more yards than any other running back available, then you take that guy, okay? Take the guy, regardless of position, available that you believe will get the most touchdowns and the most yards, okay? In the event of a tiebreaker, then advantage goes to position at running back. But for me personally, I have the returning and running with a vengeance Adrian Peterson of my hometown Minnesota Vikings as my number one ranked running back until proven otherwise. To me, he is the best back in football, both from a winning football game standpoint and from a fantasy football standpoint. At number 2, depending on the way your league scores, I have Marshawn Lynch. If you are in a PPR league, you might bump Marshawn Lynch down somewhere between 3 and 5. But I think if you're in a standard scoring league, then Marshawn Lynch is a very nice, safe bet at the number 2 overall running back. After him, I have Jamal Charles. You could make the case for him being the number 2 or number 1 running back as well. And I have Le'Veon Bell of the Steelers penciled in at number 4. If he was not guaranteed to be suspended and miss the first 2 games of the season, he would arguably be number 1. If not number 1, he would be number 2. All right, so then rounding out my top 5, I actually have Chicago Bear Matt Forte, especially if you're in a PPR league. This guy gets tons of touches, receiving and rushing. He is their offense. Scores in different ways, and he's just a really great fantasy player. The only thing you'll miss with him from some weeks is, some weeks he'll have low touchdown outputs, but so is everybody for the most part. After Matt Forte, rounding out my top tier here, we've got Eddie Lacy at 6, LaShawn McCoy of the Buffalo Bills at 7, and DeMarco Murray of the Philadelphia Eagles at 8. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8 running backs in my top elite tier. Could be the best fantasy back in all of football tier. So there you go. I mean, that's 8, 9. I mean, that's pretty solid. In your first round, you get one of those 8 running backs, or you don't take a running back in the first round. Okay? Those are the only... Justin Forsett, C.J. Anderson, Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, all these other names. Let's go through the rest of the running back names. Alfred Morris, Jeremy Hill, Mark Ingram, Giovanni Bernard, C.J. Spiller, Lamar Miller, it's a hot one, Amir Abdullah, LeGarrette Blount, Rashad Jennings, Latavius Murray, Andre Ellington, T.J. Yeldon, Telvin Coleman, Carlos Hyde, a name I've seen very high on a lot of draft boards. Whoever runs the ball in Dallas, I'm guessing it's going to be Randall. That's the guy you want. Jonathan Stewart in Carolina, as long as he's not injured, he's a good back to have on your team. Duke Johnson, rookie in Cleveland, nice sleeper pick to get. But again, you've got those 8 at the top there. Those 8 need to be going in the first round. AP, Marshawn Lynch, Jamal Charles, Le'Veon Bell, Matt Forte, Eddie Lacy, LaShawn McCoy, and DeMarco Murray. Again, those are mine, but to me there's a big drop-off. The next tier then is Justin Forsett, C.J. Anderson, Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, Alfred Morris, and Jeremy Hill. And then after that, it's all a crapshoot. Mark Ingram might be great, he might not. Lamar Miller might be great, he might not. Amir Abdullah might be great, he might not. Rashad Jennings, LeGarrette Blount. Again, all these names I've already mentioned. Carlos Hyde, T.J. Yeldon, a lot of rookies. Okay, if you're looking for value sleeper running backs in the mid to late rounds of the draft, try to pull out some of these rookies, such as Duke Johnson of the Cleveland Browns. We've also got T.J. Yeldon of the Jaguars, Tevin Coleman of the Atlanta Falcons, Amir Abdullah of the Detroit Lions. These will all be producers, as well as your bigger name Melvin Gordon and Todd Gurley. So there's your running backs list and strategies, who I like, who I don't like, right there. Now let's get into wide receiver, by far the deepest, most talented position in the fantasy football world this year. If the worst thing you could do is take Calvin Johnson with the 5th overall pick in the first round of your draft, or something along those lines. Or I'm picking 6, and the 2 running backs I like are already gone, so I picked Odell Beckham Jr. Like that, it might work out for you. But I can guarantee you can get a wide receiver that's going to put up, top tier receiver numbers in rounds 3 through 10. The examples are countless, too numerous to count every year. Antonio Brown and Emmanuel Sanders, just to throw out some recent names that fantasy owners would recognize. And coincidentally, this top tier, the elite top tier of wide receivers, has the more names than any other position as well. At my number 1 fantasy wide receiver, going along with my number 1 quarterback Andrew Luck, I have T.Y. Hilton as my number 1 fantasy football receiver going into this season. I have Odell Beckham Jr. of the Giants at number 2, Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Bucks at number 3, Antonio Brown, last year's number 1 wide receiver, at number 4 of the Steelers, Dez Bryant, everybody's favorite delinquent down in Dallas, top 5 receiver, no question. Then starting at number 6, I got Demaryius Thomas of the Broncos. Then I had Jordy Nelson, but do not draft Jordy Nelson. He is out for the season, as well as Kelvin Benjamin. And if you're looking at running backs, I failed to mention Arian Foster is out at least the first 6 to 10 weeks, so don't draft him either. But then in at number 7, with the injured Jordy Nelson getting skipped, I have Julio Jones of the Atlanta Falcons, followed by Megatron and Emmanuel Sanders of the Broncos, and then especially with the injury to Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb shooting up the draft charts. And then I draw my line, and I actually had moved a guy to the other side of this line. But so that's your top tier. We've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 wide receivers in the top elite tier. And there are others that you could make the argument for, but I won't. And again, leading that second tier would be A.J. Green, who I had in that top tier, but I just don't trust the guy. I've seen too much inconsistency. Right behind him, I've got DeAndre Hopkins of the Texans, who was a monster last year. Alshon Jeffrey is a great receiver. Interesting to see what it'll be like not having a big-time number 2 across the field from him, and interesting to see what the new coaching staff can get out of Cutler. Keenan Allen of the San Diego Chargers, great value pick in the mid-rounds. Brandon Cooks for the New Orleans Saints, great mid-3rd to 7th round pick. Amari Cooper, a rookie wide receiver for the Oakland Raiders, another great one in there. Julian Edelman of the Patriots. Jeremy Maclin of the Kansas City Chiefs, now this first year, reunited with Andy Reid. Larry Fitzgerald, that's right, that big, huge name that everybody remembers but nobody remembers. Charles Johnson and Mike Wallace, both of the Minnesota Vikings. If you want one of these 2 guys and they're both available, take Charles Johnson. He will be the number 1 receiver as far as the production numbers go. Mike Wallace is your big play threat. Down in Miami, Jarvis Landry, huge mid-round sleeper steal. Also, Devontae Parker could turn into a big-time player there, but he is currently injured, so he's getting drafted very late, or not drafted at all. We're taking a chance on if you can get him late. For Philadelphia, we got the receivers Jordan Matthews and Nelson Aguilar. Aguilar is this year's rookie. Matthews was last year's rookie. One of those two should put up good numbers.